it's Miss Laura with the Wichita Falls Arts Council, and today we're going to make a seasonal fold-out drawing. Here are two of them. So we're going to start by drawing a character. It can be an object, it can be an animal. This is a rock with some googly eyes. And then when I unfold, we have different plants next to him. Trees. So I have these two little trees in this sort of shorter section, a medium-sized tree, and then a tall tree at the very end. On the back of this drawing is the exact same drawing. Whereas this is fall, on the back we have a spring version, but all of the trees are the same. So it's the same scene, but different seasons. So these little two trees here, if I look right behind them, same trees, but green. I have another one with two different seasons. Well, I guess one of them is the same. So I have a little rabbit here. This is my character. Again, it could be an animal, an object, a blob. And there are multiple trees. We have a little tree, a medium-sized tree, and a large tree. And on the back, we have the exact same trees, except for, one second. Okay, so we have a winter scene here, green on the back, winter on one side. So most of the branches are left bare, except for a little bit of snow that got caught in some of the branch crevices, the little pits. Okay, little rabbit. Okay, oh, and some extra holes too. Okay. And of course, an evergreen tree is always green, so it just gets a little bit of snow. But we're going to take a full sheet of paper. So it's a 12 by 18 sheet. So it's a pretty large piece of paper. One paper is for 2 students. So we're only going to use half. And then the other half can go to someone else or made for a second piece. Okay. And we're going to have to do a little bit of measuring, not very much. I'm going to use my ruler. And from this bottom left corner right here, let me see if I could change this. Okay, from the bottom left corner, I'm going to measure up 4 inches. So from this bottom corner, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 inches and make a mark, just a little mark. So I have my ruler, 4 inches, make a mark. From my top right corner, this one right here, I'm going to measure down 4 inches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, make a mark on the edge here. So I have these 2 marks right here and right here. I measured down 4 inches on the right side, measured up 4 inches on the left side. I need to draw a line to connect these 2 marks to create my diagonal. There are 2 things I can do. The first thing is that I can fold my paper back so that I can see both marks, and I can create a crease line. Just pull my paper this way to create a straight line between my 2 marks. Those need to be perfect. The second thing I can do, or an alternative way, is to borrow someone else's paper. So if I were to borrow someone else's paper, I can use the edge of their paper to connect my, just making little dots along, to get a straight path all the way from this point to this point. So that's my second option. I could even use my ruler again. Let me draw sort of a straight line going all the way from point to point. Again, doesn't need to be perfect. Just want to have an angle. Okay, once I do have that line, either by folding or by using a straight thing to make a line and draw it, I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut on this line. Okay, so cutting, and I don't need to cut perfectly. I can just make it a quick cut because we are going to cut the outlines after. Okay, a little dip, that's fine. Okay. So now that I have my paper at a diagonal, I'm going to put my paper in front of me, just like I have it. Where my two right angles are at the bottom, my cut is at the top. This taller side is on my right, lower side's on my left. And I'm going to take this lower side and I'm going to fold it in half so that my little angles at the bottom, those two corners, they meet up. Once I've done that, I'm going to take this top flap here and I'm going to fold it back in half on itself so that the bottom corners also meet up. Then I'm going to flip the whole thing over and I'm going to take this left side here. So I flipped it over. My tall side's on the left now. My shorter side's on the right. My two right angle corners are at the bottom. I'm going to take this left side and I'm going to fold it back in half so the bottom corners meet up. Once I've done that, I have successfully created 4 different sections. It should look like a little zigzag when you flip it over, or like an M or W. I'm going to unfold it to reveal my 4 different sections. So I'm going to take some time to draw with a Sharpie, or you do a pencil first and sketch over in Sharpie. I need to draw the branches for all of my trees. So in each of these 3 last sections, the 3 taller sections, I'm going to create trees. In my first section here, I'm going to draw a character. So that can be an animal or an object or whatever you want it to be. Something other than a tree though. So I'm just going to do another rock because I just like them. Give him some googly eyes so it looks a little bit friendly. Okay, and then I'm going to do trees. I want to create the same trees on the front and the back. So I'm going to do a little tree here, a medium-sized tree here, and a large tree. They can be all the same kind of tree if you want. I'm going to make them all slightly different. And then we're going to do the exact same drawing on the back. And there are a few tricks that are going to help us with that. Okay, so I like to start in the middle. I'm going to do my medium-sized tree. Your trees can look anything or like any kind of tree that you want. I'm going to draw just a very generic tree. Start with the trunk. And then I'm going to do just like a windy shape or windy line. And I'm going to taper it by having it start thick at the bottom and then get thinner as it gets to the top. And then from there, so I have my first branch, I'm going to branch off of this branch somewhere near the bottom. And I'm going to go there. Just a windy shape. We're doing an organic form, something that occurs in nature, and maybe the tree had to be really windy to get to the sun. Okay, I'm going to branch off of that, the slightly smaller branch. So my branches, I want them to get a little bit skinnier as they go further from the trunk. Okay. Just gonna do some more branches, the branches that branch off of little branches. Maybe it ends in a little double branch. So we can do the same here. I don't want to use up as much of the space as I can. And I'm only drawing branches right now. I'm not drawing any leaves because the leaves are going to be made with oil pastels, which are going to give us all of our color. We just want to provide the structure or the outline of where our leaves are going to go. Okay, so I feel like that's enough branches. I'm going to do a different tree in this big section here. So maybe some kind of evergreen tree, like a Douglas fir or spruce. To start with one skinny trunk in the center, a little bit bigger at the bottom. And then from there, I'm going to branch off whiter at the bottom. They're going to go slightly up, I think. Maybe some of those branch off. And they get shorter as we get to the top. Okay. There's another tree. Let's see, we have one more. I'm going to make this one just a little bush. These can all be pretty skinny branches. It's not supporting a lot of weight because it's so short. Little branches, just little sticks that start on from another branch and then they just go out. Okay. Going to now add an optional horizon. So I'm starting at my little rock. Then draw a line going behind it. And this is all Sharpie at this point, so it doesn't matter if this line goes on top of these solid things. Okay, so I have my drawing in Sharpie done on one side. I need to do this on the other side too. And there are a few things that I can do. Number one is hope that a lot of your Sharpie bled through. It bled through a little bit, but not a lot. And that can sort of tell you where to draw the same tree on the other side because we want them to be in the same place. The second option is to, I'm going to switch my camera for this one. Okay. Is to hold it up to the light. So my Sharpie is facing up towards the light, and I'm looking at the blank side on the back. But if we look at it, we can kind of see, well, it's hard to see on here. We can kind of see the drawing through the back when we hold it through. It's like casting a shadow onto the other side. And so we can take our Sharpie and then trace at least the major branches. So I'm tracing the major branches. Let's see. There you go. You can kind of see the outline of this tree. There's a branch and a branch. We're mostly doing it for location and general size. So I'm going to trace what I can. See if your overhead lights are not on or they're not very bright. Maybe you can have your drawing facing a window. Again, the Sharpie side away from you, and you're tracing on the back. Whatever lines show through. And this helps us create the same drawing on both sides. If it was a really thick paper, this wouldn't work, but it shouldn't be too bad. Okay. Little one. I have a GoPro for this. Trace my rock too. Resin. Okay. So traced. Just over those thin lines that I made. Fix this. Nice. Okay, once I'm done drawing with my Sharpie on both sides, then I'm ready for color. I will do that in just a moment. So now we're ready to add some color. We have our branches on both sides. They match. I'm going to just start with this middle one. And the first thing we're going to do is look at a picture of a real tree. Okay, so here's a tree, a picture from the internet. And we look at this tree and we're trying to look at the colors that they're using. And it looks like we see one major green that's on most of this tree. It's mostly one shade of green. But then we look at the shadows and we see a darker green. And then we look at the highlights and we see a lighter green or even a yellow. So we're imagining that the sun is shining down on this tree and it's hitting the top of what looks like these little puffs of leaves. So it's lighter on the top, it's medium green in the center, and then it gets darker green as it casts a shadow underneath. So we're going to think about creating a tree with these sort of fluffy sort of groups of leaves or puffs. We're going to do a medium green body, and then we'll do a light green highlight for where the sun hits first, with a shadow that casts underneath where the sun isn't shining. So I'm going to start with this middle tree. I'm going to zoom in. And I have two greens in my oil pastel pack. I have a medium green and a dark green. I'm going to use the medium green. So I'm starting in the middle as far as colors are concerned. And I'm going to draw using the branches as a guideline. I'm basically smushing color onto where these branches are, where they end, in the middle of the tree. And I'm not drawing an outline of where I want these little green puffs of leaves to be. I'm basically just scribbling on color. I'm not drawing individual leaves either. I want most of this face to be filled out by this medium green color. And they can be connected. I could leave some little spaces on the inside. Because we're thinking about is not drawing individual leaves, we're thinking about drawing the colors that the leaves are in the general area that they are. Okay, so I have a bunch of these little puffs. A lot of them are connected and they're not really separated from each other. I'm going to use my darker green now. And I could use a different darker color. You use like a dark blue or a dark purple or any other sort of darker color to create the shadows, even like a brown or black. My goal is to make my shadows darker than my medium or base color. So I'm going to go underneath these puffs and I'm going to add little shadows. I don't need to be super exact about it. I'm also not drawing a straight line. I'm also sort of just pushing in the color. I'm scribbling in. That's helping it blend into that medium green. And I'm just going in between and underneath all of the shapes that kind of look like puffs. Or if my puffs aren't really distinguishable, like I can't really tell them apart from each other, then I'm just kind of going randomly and adding in some shadow. Okay, so I have my medium green, I have my darker green to create shadows. Now I want to create highlights. And I don't have a lighter green color, but I do have a yellow, which is pretty close on the color wheel. So I'm going to go on the tops of all of these little puffs and scribble in some yellow. So this is where the sun is hitting first. It's going to create a highlight. Get to some of these middle puffs here. I'm just going to throw a little highlight scribble on top of each of these little puffs. I can go back in with that medium green and work against the shadows and the highlights. Really start blending the colors together. Okay, so here's my spring side. I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of the trees on this side. I'm going to go all green. I can start with, maybe I want them to look a little bit different. So I can start with a darker green for this evergreen tree. And even though when we have like pine trees with straight needles, we're not going to draw straight lines. We're still going to scribble in the color because we're almost thinking about it as like a blurry image. We don't want to draw individual leaves. We do want to just represent the color that's there. And I'm using my branches as a guide for where to draw my leaves. Okay, so I don't have a darker green than this, so that means I'm going to choose another color to use. So a darker color than this dark green. So that can be a black, it can be a brown, it could even be a dark blue, which I think I'm going to try. So I'm going to go underneath, I'm going to do these little shadows in between some of these puffs of green that I've created. And then I'm going to do a highlight. So I need a lighter color than the green I started with. So I'm going to use this regular green. And I'm going to fill in some of those gaps, go on top of some of those little puffs that I made, maybe along this edge here. There's tree number 2. Last thing is a little bush. I'm going to start with we'll just do this medium green. And maybe to make it different than all the other ones, I'll use the blue as my shadow color. And a little more green there. And then some other color as a highlight. Maybe we'll go white. Oh, here's nice yellow. And whatever that medium color is, we just want a color that's darker than it for highlights, and a color that it's darker than it for shadows. Okay. And then I can make my rock whatever color I want. I can blend colors. I think I have a gray somewhere in here. And there's my little rock. I'm going to flip my paper over. And before I do that, I'm going to find something to put underneath it. We're just going to use the other half of my sheet. You'd also use any sort of scrap paper, or you can choose to wipe off the tables after you're done, because it might leave a little bit of a mark. Okay. So I did spring on one side. I need to do some other color combinations on the other side to show a different season. So I have some options. I can choose to do fall colors, which are our oranges, our reds, our yellows, or I can choose to make this a winter scene by adding in white. So I have my white pastel here. A little bit of white. And I can choose to cover things in snow. So I could leave most of these trees bare and then add little bits of snow on top of each of the branches. Maybe put a little bit of snow underneath. That'll make it look like it was snowing on some bare branches. Or I can choose to do fall colors. So let's get out some oranges, some reds, even some browns. And I'm going to start by making an orange tree. So doing the same thing, doing these little puffs of color. And I'm using my medium color. So this is going to be my orange here. And I'm going to figure out a darker color than this orange. To create shadows. And then a lighter color to create highlights. So shadows underneath, highlights on top. So I think I'm going to go brown for my shadows. And so I'm going underneath each of these little puffed areas. Again, just scribbling and pushing in the color. Not drawing individual leaves or an outline of a shape. I'm just scribbling, pushing the oil pencil or oil pastel onto the paper until I get the amount of color I want in the general shape that I want. I'm gonna go back in with this orange and work against some of these shadows because I feel like they're pretty heavy, they're pretty thick, they're overpowering the orange, so I'm just gonna add more orange. The final thing that I'm going to do is add my highlight. So I need to find a lighter color than the orange, which is my main sort of medium color. So I think I'm going to find that yellow again. There's a little bit of green on it. That's okay. And I'm going to go over the tops of each of these little puffed areas. All the way over the top. After the sun's really hitting. Maybe one more. Okay, and once I've done that, then I have a nice fall tree. And I can do the same thing with the rest of these trees. This is an evergreen tree, so I'm probably going to make it exactly the same color that I did on the back. And then this little bush, maybe I'll just make this a little yellow bush. And then what's lighter than yellow is my white. So I can use my white as my highlight and then maybe the orange as my shadow. Let's do the brown shadow. Okay. Color in my rock. And then I'll finish doing the rest of this tree on the very right. I think I'll probably finish later. Okay, so now I have most of my trees colored. I'm going to pretend that all of them are colored in. I want to do one final thing, and that is I want to cut an outline of these trees and bushes out. So I'm going to grab my scissors and giving a little bit of space I'm going to cut around the rock. Remember, I'm not cutting on the line. I'm going to cut around it because the foliage or the leaves or the trees on the other side may not be the same size or shape. And so I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm just going to cut around them. I'm going to cut all the way down. Nice little outline of the top. And then now I'm going to fold it up. And I have my little fold out drawing that can stand up on its own. And then you're done.